how important is the performance of your applications in terms of business success? We only ever hear the negative stories.
Right.
Do you all wake up and live with, I could be the BA today? We'll start with the negative and move towards. Are you all working on things
where
to
a positive later, Mark?
to the positive?
In my case, our business is built on the fact that that is the case. We have, or you all have, users that there are some corporate applications they have to use. This is not a choice. Part of their work is those applications. So, for us, our business is effectively being built on performance management of those mission critical business applications. What we do see is the element of it's well understood that these issues are there and they need to be addressed. And then there's the element of users are so sick and tired of the performance issue, they stop complaining. And I guess from your perspective, making big decisions around strategies, where to invest and so on, you might sometimes have a bit of a false information of, no, that thing works fine. Nobody ever complains about it. And it might be because it's great, or it might be because they've completely given up. And that gets you stuck in the middle, I guess, around what do you do next in such a situation.
In lots of businesses I've worked in the past, it's vitally important, but where I am now, I think you see an obsession with efficiency and time, and being able to effectively get to the services you need for them to work in your region or your location, and to work across locations in some quite complex ways. If that isn't working well, or isn't working quickly, or isn't reliable, then that's a major issue. So we bill on 6-minute intervals. So if someone's sitting around for a minute, the clock is already ticking. So you need to be very aware of how fast the services work and how efficiently they work. And so, yeah, it wouldn't be too much to say it's a bit of an obsession now. So we're starting to look at. So I've only been in this role for 10 months or so, but looking at what sort of tooling do we need to really understand what's happening, and getting into more and more detail around what's happening, not just on the desktop, but all the way back from wherever you're using the application back to wherever it's getting its data from, and what that route is, and how that is being delayed, or how things could be changed to be more efficient. So it's a bit of an obsession at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've seen, for CIOs, we've seen the digital revolution and the growth of the CDO and the rise of applications, if you like, over infrastructure and infrastructure as a service, and that's all fine. But you mentioned BA and stuff like that. If we are now so tech dependent, then the operational role for technology is actually much higher, not much lower. It's maybe not grabbing the headlines unless it's a bad incident, but the integrity of the systems, the capabilities of the network, the fundamental size of the estate that you've got, the ability to schedule, to manage, to plan well in advance. We see in our operations area, the biggest skill that we're looking at in terms of the teams we've got is not so much technical, it's more logistical. What are you going to schedule, when are you going to schedule it, how many jobs are running, why are they running? And increasingly the next step in that is, well, not just monitoring tools, but have we got automation tools, and have we got predictive tools that are going to help us understand what we're going to do? Work we do with some of our partners on security, probably the same as you guys. It's looking at billions of log items in the course of a month to identify 2 use case items that might be a security risk.
Right.
Yeah, you can't do that all the time. So
it's interesting in the things which I look for in some of the roles now. Maybe again always been the case, but I think it's something which when you look at all the choices you have about how you approach a particular problem, it's very easy to build layer on top of layer on top of layer of complexity. What you're trying to do is find people who can pick through that and understand what's the right choice to make this simpler, because simpler is easier to run, easier to manage, it's faster, it's more efficient, it's more secure, and those things are key metrics which actually you would judge yourself by. So that in itself is something which maybe isn't quite as obvious from the initial question, but actually making some of those choices is the right thing to do. So it's more fundamental than just, if we could just make this application a bit faster, well,
right.
Actually, maybe do you need that application? Do you need it at all? Is there another way of doing it which is better? So you have to think about your the people you work with and the partners, and make sure they also are on the same journey as you are. They're providing the right options.
Which also sounds like business and technology performance is very much bound into business processes, and actually you need to be looking at simplifying your business processes, and then your application performance, your business performance will follow.
I mean, sometimes, I mean, it's not always the case, I guess. If it was that simple, it would be easy, you know. But so you have to be a little wary of what assumptions you make. But there is an element of that. So are there things you can do in a more efficient way? And I think that's an ongoing task. You never stop doing that. You're always looking for ways which will allow you to monitor and see what's happening.
I quite like what you say, because it chimes back to what we were talking about earlier about this sort of segmentation. But is there a danger then that you there's a desire always to rationalise the number of applications you've got, but in the way that you described, what you might end up with is a larger number of smaller applications?
But no, I think actually, well, but possibly. But I think what I suppose the worst thing is you end up with a bit of both. So you end up with more big applications and more small applications, all trying to talk to each other, which can be a bit of a mess. And it's not entirely obvious to each of the individual owners of those things that why it's so complicated.
Particularly if it's in citizen development.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's something again. It's not to be scared of, so sometimes that is the right choice, but I think it's making sure you put the right things in place so that can be done in a way which delivers the promise of that, because if you don't have the right infrastructure to run that type of low-code environments or citizen development, which is a great thing if people can do it, these are things which you would want to make sure do work within the estate. What you don't want to find is the limitations of other things you've done. I mean that those things also don't work, or they don't work as they promised. So, you shouldn't be scared of them. You should just figure out what's the right way to use them.
If I may put a bit of a startup spin on this, so actually, it's not about the number of applications at this point. It is about, as you say, the performance. And I think what's exactly the same is prioritization. Exactly the same as what do you prioritise? What's most important to keep, the business engagement and the success. And I think for a lot of things is actually, what we're doing is about sort of pulling data together. So actually, what needs to be real time? So for example, someone asks our cancer question, we want that real time data pulled back from the NHS site. But actually, if someone's trying to find a Facebook group, how often do those get updated? Is a once a day refresh okay? And I think it's as well as how you use and pull the data that affects your performance and the speed in which results come back if you're an online sort of space. So I think what I would advise and sort of recommend to other sort of startups is, if you're thinking about performance, what really does have to be real time to get the latest and greatest and best information, versus realistically, if it's a 24-hour-old pull, is it going to make a dramatic bit of difference? Because that will help your performance and the speed that's coming back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
We hear a lot about how all sectors are becoming much more digitally connected. B2B in particular is going in the digital markets and what have you. Are you finding, therefore, you're also having to look at that? You are having to be customer driven, no matter your sector, to provide those services?
You don't get to do it differently because you judge yourselves by different standards. I think it's just as important to do that whatever sector you're in. So there's no reason for it to not be as good. I mean, you mentioned that there might be limitations on you, but fundamentally putting services together in the right way is the goal of this. You need to think about not having a different way you measure against those metrics.
Yeah.
And omnichannel is important here. Actually, what is the channel of engagement? And then you can start seeing, is there a trend in terms of what you were seeing as a request, a response, and interaction in one side compared to another channel? And there, going back to earlier, we talked about data and how much that is and should have been from the past, but we're getting more tools and kind of cloud computing, and obviously being able to crunch the data, we were able to see this a lot more, and we'll be able to understand customer behaviour. So omni-channel and giving that a go is really important.
I mean, there's a particular example from a company I used to work with. I mean, a few examples actually, which is consumer media brands, and basically proving that making things faster equaled money. So you could show that when services were slow, they cost you money. When they're faster, they made you money, and that was a very powerful thing to understand. So when you understand that, then it's much easier to have a conversation around why would you change that metric. So so I think it's, I guess going back to what I said earlier, it's having the value of data, or understanding how that can make sure you do protect the customer experience, because when you have that safeguard, I guess,
Right.
and maybe even you have someone who's a champion of that, then it's not so easy to affect that customer experience in a negative way, because there's someone there who says, well, why are we doing this? This doesn't work as well. So when you pull apart a particular service is made up of lots of parts, and actually they all seem to be good, but when you pull them apart and put them all on the same machine,
Right.
they don't work as well, and because they interfere with each other, and you need to be on top of those sort of outcomes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, we were talking earlier around, the prioritization of certain services and applications and users and user groups and segmentation and so on. And, there's also this huge disparity between the quality of services and solutions and products and applications and so on that might be, we're talking about, cultural differences and the thought process around someone thinking, I'm just this, unimportant user in a random office on the other side of the world. So I've got the lowest layer of, technology, even though what I'm doing is quite important. Versus maybe the opposite side, where an actual consumer using a customer, facing solution gets the best of everything, the best monitoring, the best tools. John, you're making a point about, understanding data and the results of that data. Giving the best performance to a user is one thing, but then also having a consumer seeing things in the right way, and especially some of the tricks that retailers do, making sure that, they can convert a cart into a sale and so on. All of those things come together, but I guess what I see is a lot of inconsistency around the processes, the rules, the priorities, and the investment, and even the data that gets collected across all of those different layers. So you get this different cultural difference from a technology standpoint on internal user, external consumer, maybe some business to business in the middle, which is relevant. And that's probably some of the impact of this era of cloud is having, in that everybody's stuck in, well, not everybody, cloud native are not stuck in hybrid, but the traditional enterprise is. And I think, John, you're making a point about what's on, what's off, what should be switched on, what do we keep, and so on. It starts getting bigger and bigger and almost impossible to manage. And at what point do you just think, what, let's switch that off and see what happens?
Yeah, I kind of object to, if you're stuck in hybrid, because that suggests that that's a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see a world where entire cloud is a good thing.
I completely agree, yeah.
So yeah. Okay.
Well, probably the terminology of hybrid.
I think it was John's point earlier,
Yeah.
If you don't know why you're there and you don't know how
Right.
you're going to get from there, or if indeed you want to get from there, then that's a pretty dark place.
Right.
Okay. But if you are comfortable to be in hybrid for specific and you've made active choices,
Right.
then that
They're by
might well be
design,
the right
yeah.
place. So
Sure.
by design, because you may be on a kind of decline path or a growth path, wherever you're going to be. Cloud is interesting to us for SaaS services, for
Mm-hmm.
functional activities, whether it's Workday, People Link, these kinds of things. But fundamental operations, the size of them, the nature of them, the legacy of them, we probably have them on site. On the other hand, because my mainframe operation, which has been completely stable for 40 or 50 years, actually sits in Belgium and has done for about 15 years, was I on the cloud before cloud was invented?
Right.
So it depends on the definition,
Yes.
it depends what you're going to do, but I think your point earlier has made me think again about some of the choices that we're making. And the more active choices you can make, well then you can explain it to people and you can deal with it. Yeah?
Makes sense.
Stuck. You can't use that word stuck anymore, right?
You could be stuck by design or stuck not by design.
Yeah.
I guess that's the difference.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be comfortable with change and how you make the right arguments about where you invest and what things. So, you've got a mainframe in Belgium. Maybe there's no reason to change that ever. That shouldn't be. It shouldn't be changed for change's sake, but you should be comfortable with knowing what the implications of that decision are, and how you can reach the right outcomes for the rest of the pieces that need to sit around that. So what else do you need to do to make sure that that's effective and continues to be effective going forward? I mean, skills are also an interesting element of this. So finding people that not just understand this well, but are actually passionate about it. So people who really care about shaving the milliseconds off things, you know, which actually can make a huge difference. Because when you have someone who has that potential to really have the energy to dive into some often quite complex interactions going on across, certainly for a global business, you know, you might find that quite difficult to understand. And where do you start with that problem? Where is the actual issue? And you find that some people have the propensity to do that, and those are, you know, it's another type of skill set which is growing, and that the ability to understand what things you can do about those problems is enormously valuable.
Right.
Yeah, that's similar to what we mentioned earlier with the technology piece. So you need a technology affinity and maybe a technology understanding, but you do need other skills, and whether it's kind of logistics mindset or data mindset, etc., to come at it from a different perspective, to say, what am I optimizing? You talk about speed. I guess banks and trading companies, those nanoseconds are crucial in a trading environment. Yeah. For us, if we're sending an EDI invoice to a customer, you know, it doesn't need to be a nanosecond faster. Right. It really doesn't. It's just, it's a one-time transaction once a day.